Good afternoon, television fans. Big Al here on this Friday, April 3rd, 2026. And welcome to episode number 31 of Television Station History. Today we're beginning a look at the stations in the Chicago television market, and we'll begin with the history of WBBM-TV. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and get notified every time I go live. And here we go with the history of WBBM-TV. Info courtesy of Wikipedia. WBBM-TV Channel 2 is a television station in Chicago, Illinois, serving as the market's CBS network outlet. Owned and operated by the network's CBS News and Stations division, the station maintains studios on West Washington Street in the Chicago Loop, and it transmits from the top of the Willis Tower, which I still think is the Sears Tower. So now here is the specs on WBBM-TV Chicago, an ATSC 3.0 station. The station broadcasts on Virtual Channel 2 and RF Digital Channel 12. On-air brands are CBS Chicago, that's their general brand, and their news brand is CBS News Chicago, and we'll talk about the sub-channels at the end. The owner is CBS News and Stations, and the license is held by CBS Broadcasting Incorporated. Alright, WBBM-TV began, or rather WBBM-TV was founded on August 5th, 1940 as experimental station W9XBK and signed on the air on September 6th, 1946 as WBKB-TV, originally broadcasting on Channel 4. Their analog signal was on Channel 4 from 1940 to 1953, and then around the time CBS purchased the station, their analog signal moved to VHF Channel 2 and stayed there from 1953 to 2009. Their digital signal aired on RF Digital Channel 3 from 2003 to 2009. WBBM-TV began as an independent station from 1946 to 1949, and then was affiliated with the Paramount Network from 1949 to 1953, before becoming a CBS-owned and operated station. The call sign was taken from its former sister station, WBBM Radio. Licensing authority is the Federal Communications Commission. Their facility ID number is 9617. They broadcast at an effective rated power of 29.5 kilowatts. The transmitter located at the top of Sears Tower is 500.4 meters or 1,642 feet above average terrain. Sorry. And their website is www.cbsnews.com/Chicago. Alright, diving into the history of the station, beginning with the early history from 1940 to 1953. WBBM-TV traces its history to 1940, when Balaban and Katz, a subsidiary of Paramount Pictures, signed on experimental station W9XBK, the first all-electronic television facility in Chicago. Balaban and Katz was already well known for owning several movie theaters in the Chicago area. To establish the station, the company hired television pioneer William C. Bill Eddy away from RCA's experimental station W2XBS in New York City, which is today's WNBC. When World War II began, Edie used the W9XBK facilities as a prototype school for training Navy electronics technicians. While operating the Navy school, Edie continued to lead W9XBK and wrote a book that defined commercial television for many years. On September 6, 1946, the station received a commercial license as WBKB, standing for Balaban and Katz Broadcasting, on VHF Channel 4, becoming the first commercial television station located outside the Eastern Time Zone. It is also the 6th commercial television station in the country, behind WNBT, which is now WNBC, WCBW, now WCBS-TV, WABD, which is currently WNYW, all three coming from New York City, as well as WRGB in Schenectady, New York, which is in the Albany and Capital District market, and WPTZ, which is today KYW-TV in Philadelphia. WBKB aired some of the earliest CBS programs, including the 1947 debut of Junior Jamboree, later named Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, after it moved to NBC in 1948. Channel 4 originally operated as an independent station, since at the time it was not clear that it would be an affiliate of either CBS or the Dumont Television Network. Eventually, KSD-TV in St. Louis, now KSDK, became the first station west of the Eastern Time Zone to affiliate with a major network. One of the station's early highlights was its telecast of the National Football League's championship game between the Chicago Cardinals and the Philadelphia Eagles on December 28, 1947. M. Nord 2005, welcome back. Nakapaka 16, what's up? Yeah, what link do you want to send? In December 1948, WBKB began sharing the market's CBS affiliation with WGN-TV Channel 9. After that station affiliated with the network. In 1949, Balaban and Katz became part of United Paramount Theaters after Paramount Pictures was forced to divest this chain of movie theaters by order of the U.S. Supreme Court. WBKB played an indirect role in Dumont's demise. At the time, Paramount Pictures owned a stake in Dumont. The Federal Communications Commission ruled that Paramount's holdings were large enough that the studio effectively controlled Dumont. Paramount also owned KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles, since Dumont already owned then WABD in New York City, which is now WNYW, as well as WTTG in Washington, D.C., and WDTV in Pittsburgh, which is now sister station KDKA-TV. The FCC's decision meant neither Paramount nor Dumont could acquire any more television stations. Paramount even launched a short-lived programming service, the Paramount Television Network, which is no relation to today's cable-only Paramount Network. And that took place in 1949, with KTLA and WBKB as its flagship stations. However, the service never gelled into a true television network. And now the station's history as a CBS owned and operated station since 1953. In February 1953, United Paramount Theaters merged with the American Broadcasting Company, or ABC, which already owned WENR-TV Channel 7. Of course, that station will later become WLS-TV. As the newly merged entity could not keep both stations since FCC regulations enforced during that time forbade the common ownership of two television stations licensed to the same market. WBKB was sold to CBS for $6.75 million. On February 12th, one day after the merger was finalized, the station changed its call letters to WBBM-TV, named after WBBM Radio 780 AM and 96.3 FM, which CBS had owned since 1929. The WBKB call letters were subsequently assumed by Channel 7. That station would eventually change its call sign to the present WLS-TV in 1968. And presently, the WBKB call sign now resides on a CBS-affiliated station in Alpena, Michigan. While the old WBKB's talent remained with the new WBBM-TV under the radio station's longtime general manager H. Leslie Atlas, the UPT era management of the old WBKB moved to Channel 7. As a result of WBBM-TV's purchase by CBS, it picked up all CBS programming previously carried by WGN-TV. After a 2-month cancellation clause in Channel 9's affiliation contract with CBS, it left Channel 9 with the quickly crumbling Dumont Television Network as its sole affiliation. In accordance with the VHF channel allocation realignments imposed by the FCC and issuance of the 6th report and order, WBBM-TV relocated to Channel 2 on July 5, 1953, to eliminate interference with WTMJ-TV in Milwaukee, which is 2 hours north of Chicago, and WHBF-TV in the Quad Cities. WTMJ-TV concurrently moved to VHF Channel 4 from Channel 3 to avoid interference with fellow CBS station WKZO-TV in Kalamazoo, Michigan, known today as WWMT, located on the other side of Lake Michigan, which itself broadcasts on Channel 3. The Channel 2 allocation was coincidentally freed up at the same time as the state capital of Springfield was forced to let the allocation relocate to St. Louis, where the allocation was assigned to KTVI. The reshuffling also forced Zenith to shut down KS2XBS, an experimental station on Channel 2 in Chicago that the company maintained for its pioneering pay-per-view service, Phone Vision. In 1956, CBS consolidated its Chicago operations into the former Chicago Arena, a renovated 62,000 square foot 3-story building at 633 North McClure Court in Chicago's Streeterville neighborhood. The property was built in 1924 as a horse stable and had operated as an ice rink and a bowling alley prior to CBS's approximately $1.3 million purchase of the building. That year, an episode of What's My Line originated from the WBBM studios, airing one day prior to the start of the 1956 Democratic National Convention. Between the late 1940s and early 1970s, Columbia Records housed an office and recording studio in the building. On September 26, 1960, WBBM's McClure Court Studios served as the site of the first televised presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. WBBM-TV also served as production home to the syndicated programs Donahue from 1982 to 1985 and Siskel and Ebert from 1986 to the late 1990s, when production migrated to the studios of WLS-TV on State Street. In October 1987, Center City Communications, a locally based investor group led by attorney Brenda Minor, filed a challenge to the FCC's renewal of WBBM-TV's station license. However, in asking the agency not to renew the station's license through 1992, Center City never detailed any specific objections to the station's license renewal, although it had been speculated that the challenge may have been related to the then recent boycott of Operation Push, surrounding the lack of diversity with the station staff and allegations that WBBM's hiring practices were not fair towards blacks. Minor, who is African American, later cited that the station did not fulfill obligations to public affairs programming. Center City dropped its challenge 3 months later in July after reaching a settlement agreement with CBS, in which Center City agreed not to challenge the license renewal of any CBS station for a 5-year period, in return for a $187,500 payment by CBS. The challenge sparked cause for the FCC to reform its comparative renewal process, which certain broadcasters claim was used solely on the purpose of extorting large cash settlements from stations. The station was brought back under common ownership with Paramount Pictures when Viacom, which acquired the studio from Gulf and Western in 1994, and merged with the original CBS Corporation in a $36 billion deal in February 2000. Sorry about that. This union was broken up again in December 2005 when Viacom became CBS Corporation and spun off Paramount Pictures and Viacom's cable networks into a separate company that assumed the Viacom name. In 2003, WBBM signed a lease agreement with Chevy Chase, Maryland-based developer Mills Corporation to build a media center for the station in the Block 37 developments in the Chicago Loop Business District, which plans to include a street-level studio that would overlook Daley Plaza. WBBM had early considered selling the McClure Court facility with the intent to relocate into a new studio complex in 1998, with areas on North Fairbanks Court, North Michigan Avenue, and West Jackson Street as potential sites for the planned facility. However, their plans were postponed due to the transition to high-definition broadcasting. On September 21, 2008, WBBM-TV moved to new facilities in the Block 37 studio at the corner of Dearborn and Washington Streets, with a 30 by 19-foot LED screen that adorns the lower facade of the 17-story building, which some residents complained is tacky and visibly hyperactive. This move coincided with the upgrade of Channel 2's newscast to high definition, which made WBBM the fourth television station in Chicago to begin broadcasting their newscast in the format. Field footage converted to the format over a period of years, and that took place in early 2006. The WBBM radio stations moved into new studio facilities within 2 Prudential Plaza on North Stetson Avenue. The former McClure Court facility building was demolished over a 2-month period from February to April 2009. WBBM-TV moved its news set upstairs to a more traditional studio in September 2017, after an obligation to maintain its main studio in the street-side space for 10 years was fulfilled, with CBS eventually removing the LED screen and putting the space up for retail lease in 2019. Though with no interest coming in during the COVID-19 pandemic, WBBM-TV returned to using it in late 2020 to allow for wider social distancing of station workplaces. WBBM-TV shut down its analog signal over VHF Channel 2 on June 12, 2009, the official date on which full-powered television stations in the U.S. transitioned from analog to digital broadcast under federal mandate. The station's digital signal moved from the pre-transition VHF Channel 3 to the current post-transition VHF Channel 12 using Virtual Channel 2. On October 21, 2014, CBS and locally based Weigel Broadcasting announced that they would partner to launch Decades, a digital multicast network which was soft launched in Chicago on WBBM Channel 2.2, when that sub-channel launched on February 1st, 2015, with the network making its formal national debut 4 months later on May 25th. Decades would move to WCIU DT4 on September 3rd, 2018, with WBBM's second subchannel becoming the home of a second Weigel/CBS concept network known as Start TV, which specializes in airing procedural dramas with women in the lead roles. On February 2nd, 2017, CBS agreed to sell CBS Radio to Entercom, known today as Odyssey, currently the fourth largest radio broadcasting company in the country. The sale was completed on November 17, 2017, and was considered using a reverse Morris trust so that it was tax-free. While CBS shareholders retained a 72% ownership stake in the combined company, Entercom was the surviving entity, with WBBM Radio and its sister stations now separated from WBBM-TV. Though WBBM News Radio maintains a continuing and strong overall partnership with WBBM-TV. In August 2018, Jeff Harris took up the helm as news director of Channel 2. Longtime evening anchor Rob Johnson was let go in March 2019, replaced by Brad Edwards. Edwards joined Erica Sargent in the 5, 6, and 10 p.m. newscasts. Edwards shifted to the morning newscast in May 2022 as part of a talent adjustment when former WGN-TV and inaugural News Nation anchor Joe Donlin took over his former position months after inaugural News Nation news director Jennifer Lyons became Channel 2's president and general manager after a shift in that network's news philosophy. The two disagreed on carrying forward with Nexstar Media Group. All right. Now to programming, beginning with sports programming. From 1946 to 1951, WBKB telecast Chicago Cubs home games. Cubs owner Philip K. Wrigley believed baseball could benefit from television if a system could be developed that would appeal to housewives as well as their husbands. Wrigley gave the rights to WBKB to air the Cubs for the first 2 years for free. The first attempt to telecast a Cub game on April 21, 1946, was unsuccessful due to electronic interference in the State Lake building where the station's transmitter was located. The July 13, 1946 contest between the Chicago Cubs and the Brooklyn Dodgers marked Chicago's first successful telecast of a Major League Baseball game. Hey, Anna, what's going on? How are you? There we go. I'm going to time them out. All right, there we go. In 1956, when CBS began televising NFL games, WBBM became the primary station for the Chicago Bears, carrying most of the team's regular season games as well as preseason games off and on through the years. And until they moved to St. Louis in 1960, they were also the primary station for Chicago Cardinals regular season games as well. The WBBM Bears partnership continued until the end of the 1993 season, when the network lost the rights to the National Football Conference, or the NFC, to Fox, with the majority of games being carried since then by that network's Chicago O&O WFLD. Presently, WBBM-TV carries Bears regular season games only during weeks in which the team is scheduled to host an AFC opponent at Soldier Field in a Sunday afternoon time slot. However, beginning in 2014 with the introduction of cross-flex scheduling, and with it the end of the targeting broadcast rights by conference, exceptions exist for certain games telecasts that CBS originally held rights to, which are shifted to Fox, such as the 2014 home game against the Buffalo Bills, and NFC versus NFC games that are conversely shifted from Fox to CBS, such as a 2019 home game against the Minnesota Vikings. Additionally, Super Bowl 41, where the Bears played against the Indianapolis Colts, was televised by CBS and WBBM. From 1973 to 1990, WBBM-TV aired select Chicago Bulls games via the NBA on CBS. From 2003 to 2007, WBBM-TV served as the host broadcaster of the Chicago Marathon, which is held annually in October, taken over from NBC-owned and operated station WMAQ-TV to accommodate the telecast. Some CBS News programs were preempted or delayed. Marathon coverage returned to WMAQ-TV Channel 5 in 2008. All right, on to the station's news operation. WBBM-TV broadcasts 37 hours, 25 minutes of locally produced newscasts each week, airing 6 hours and 5 minutes on weekdays, 4.5 hours on Saturdays, and 2.5 hours on Sundays. All right, now news department history. In the late 1970s, Channel 2's newscasts surged past Channel 5 for first place. Its news department during that time had become one of the more respected local news operations in the country, and was considered a bastion of serious journalism. Led by anchors Bill Curtis and Walter Jacobson, weatherman John Coughlin, and sports director Johnny Morris, WBBM dominated the news ratings during the late 1970s and early 1980s. At one point, its dominance was so absolute that the station titled its 10 p.m. newscast The 10 O'Clock News. Curtis and Jacobson were first teamed together in 1973 by general manager Robert Wussler and news director Van Gordon Salter, who introduced the hard news format and began using the newsroom as the set for all of Channel 2's newscasts. Curtis became known for his focus unit in-depth reports, and Jacobson for his perspective commentaries. Among the other news staffers employed with WBBM-TV during this period were film critic Gene Siskel, police and crime reporter John Bulldog Drummond, women and consumer issues reporter Susan Anderson, feature reporter Bob Wallace, investigative reporter Pam Zachman, medical reporter Roger Field, political reporter Mike Flannery, and reporter/weekend news anchor Mike Parker. Bob Surratt and Phil Ponce, who would both later host the news magazine program Chicago Tonight on PBS member station WTTV Channel 11, were also employed as reporters for Channel 2 during this period. Parker and Zechman both remained with the station until their respective departures in 2016 and 2020. Drummond also still contributes occasional reports. In 1982, Bill Curtis left WBBM-TV to join CBS News as anchor of the CBS Morning News. He would be replaced as anchor of WBBM's weeknight newscasts by former Channel 5 anchor Don Craig. When Curtis returned to Channel 2 3 years later in October 1985, he was teamed up with Craig on the hour-long 6 p.m. newscast. Harry Porterfield, who had co-anchored that newscast for several years, was concurrently demoted to weekend mornings. Porterfield, who is African American, later left to become a reporter and part-time anchor at WLS-TV Channel 7. But his earlier demotion led Jesse Jackson and his locally based civil rights organization Operation Push to begin a boycott of Channel 2. At one point, drafting a proposal to CBS and Channel 2 station management that called for the station to implement a 40% minority hiring quota, hire 2 black male anchors to its news staff, and have CBS grant a financial commitment of $11 million to minority interests. This boycott would last until August 1986. In the midst of the boycott, Gary Cummings resigned as WBBM's vice president and general manager in March 1986 and was replaced 2 weeks later by one-time assistant news director Jonathan Rogers, who became the first African-American GM at the station. Channel 2 later hired African-American journalist Lester Holt, later of NBC News, to replace Porterfield as evening anchor. Bill Curtis would leave the station for the second time in 1996. In March 1986, Channel 7, which had been third for many years, overtook WBBM at number 1. In 1990, WBBM hired Bill Applegate, who had taken Channel 7 to first place as its news director as general manager. Applegate took Jacobson off the anchor desk. He would eventually leave for Fox-owned and operated WFLD in April 1993, and controversially made the newscasts much flashier than they have previously been. The reporting staff during this period notably included Elizabeth Vargas, formerly with ABC News, Rob Stafford, now at WMAQ-TV, Jim Avila, now at ABC, Larry Mandit, now a commentator at New York's WPIX, and Don Steinland, a former 10 p.m. anchor at Fox-owned WTXF-TV in Philadelphia. It was enough for a rebound the station to a first-place tie with Channel 7 by 1993. The momentum did not last as Vargas, Avila, Mandate, Stafford, and Steinland all left the station within a short time. By the mid-1990s, however, WBBM-TV dropped to last place. For most of the next decade, both Channels 7 and 5 fought for first place, while Channel 2's news division languished, with its newscasts often trailing syndicated reruns on WFLD Channel 32. The station has undergone several different on-air brand schemes over the years, from its longtime brand of Channel 2 News to News 2 Chicago in 1997, and later to the present CBS 2 News. The most notable of many changes WBBM-TV has made to its news operation occurred in 2000. When it revamped its 10 p.m. news by ditching the traditional news format in favor of a focus on in-depth hard news features, a staple of the station's glory days. Anchored by former longtime Channel 5 anchor Carol Marin, the newscast was hailed as a return to quality, in-depth journalism in the best CBS tradition at a time when tabloid journalism and soft news were becoming the norm in broadcast news. However, plummeting led to the newscast format being dropped in October after only 9 months, with the program reverting to a more traditional late news format. In April 2002, the station eliminated its year-old computer-intensive graphics and Newsplex studio in favor of a simpler studio and corresponding graphics set. That March, former Good Morning America newsreader Antonio Mora was appointed at Channel 2 as Channel 2's main anchor. Meanwhile, former WLS-TV anchor Diane Burns joined Mora at the anchor desk in October 2003. In January 2006, WBBM-TV earned its best finish at 5 p.m. in 13 years, when it surpassed WMAQ for second place in the time slot, although it was still far behind WLS. Channel 2's 10 p.m. news remained in last place, however. It was the only late newscast to increase its audience share during the first month of 2006. WBBM-TV also finished second from sign-on to sign-off, which is identified as 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., leapfrogging from fourth for its best monthly performance in 23 years. In August 2006, Channel 2 added Rob Johnson, who had previously served as weekend anchor on Channel 7 beginning in 1998, to co-anchor the 5 p.m. news alongside Burns, while Mora and Burns continued to co-anchor at 6 and 10. In May 2007, WBBM-TV slipped down to fourth from sign-on to sign-off, behind WLS-TV Channel 7, CW affiliate WGN-TV Channel 9, and NBC station WMAQ Channel 5, and just barely ahead of Fox station WFLD Channel 32. Immediately following that, WBBM replaced Antonio Mora on the 10 p.m. news with Johnson. Mora continued to co-anchor the 6 p.m. news and hosted Ion Chicago before leaving the station in January 2008 to become evening anchor at their Miami sister station, WFOR-TV. Johnson then added the 6 p.m. news and Eye on Chicago to his duties. On March 31, 2008, WBBM announced that Diane Burns' contract would not be renewed. She, along with medical editor Mary Ann Childers, sports director Mark Malone, and reporters Raphael Romo and Katie McCall, were among the 18 staffers laid off from the station due to budget cuts enforced by CBS television stations. That month, WBBM hired Ryan Baker, previously of Channel 5, to serve as Channel 2's sports director. On April 30th, 2009, WBBM-TV laid off an undisclosed number of additional employees. In addition, the station canceled its weekend morning newscast and the public affairs program Eye on Chicago, while also restructuring its weeknight newscast at 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. to a solo anchor format, with Ann State being relegated to the 5 p.m. news, while Rob Johnson continued as anchor of the latter editions. With its 10 p.m. newscast committed to enterprise reporting, that newscast began year-to-year growth that continues to this day. Harry Porterfield returned to Channel 2 after 24 years at Channel 7 on August 3, 2009, to anchor the 11 a.m. news with Roseanne Tellez, and also to continue Someone You Should Know, the series of feature reports he began at Channel 2 in 1977. On November 13, 2009, as main anchor Rob Johnson was away on vacation, Bill Curtis and Walter Jacobson returned to Channel 2 to anchor the 10 p.m. news. Jacobson later remained to continue his trademark perspective commentaries. During the November 2009 sweeps period, WBBM's 10 p.m. news overtook WMAQ for second place, behind market-dominant WLS-TV, and was the only late news or late-night newscast in Chicago to see viewership increase over the November 2008 sweeps period. In January 2010, ratings for the 10 p.m. news remained in second place, increasing from the previous year from a 4.3 to a 6.0 rating. During the February 2010 Nielsen ratings sweeps period, the 10 p.m. news slipped back to third place behind Channel 5, due in large part to the latter network's airing of the 2010 Winter Olympics. By May 2012, the 10 p.m. news on Channel 2 finished second behind WLS. On February 1st, 2010, WBBM replaced its weekday morning newscast with Monsters and Money in the Morning, a roundtable talk show hosted by Mike North and Dan Jiggets, former hosts at radio station WSCR 670, and of Comcast Sportsnet Chicago's Monsters in the Morning, that focused on sports and financial topics, along with news and weather segments. The program, which was produced independently from the news department to allow revenue from endorsements and product placement, was canceled due to low ratings after just 7 months. Ending on August 27th, it would be replaced on August 30th by a more conventional morning news program anchored by former WCBS TV anchor Steve Bartelstein. In March 2010, Ann State's contract was not renewed, while longtime meteorologist and technical reporter Ed Curran was relieved of his duties, though he continued to be paid for the remaining 14 months of his contract. Longtime political editor Mike Flannery also left the station after 30 years to join rival WFLD. On September 1st, 2010, Curtis and Jacobson were paired once again together as anchors of Channel 2's 6 p.m. news, where they remained until February 2013, at which time Rob Johnson and former WCBS-TV morning anchor Kate Sullivan, the latter of whom joined the station on September 13, 2010 to co-anchor the news at 5 and 10, where she remained until September 2015, and she would assume anchor duties for that program. Channel 2's evening newscast showed significant growth afterward, often battling with Channel 5 for second place behind dominant Channel 7. Weekend morning newscast returned to WBBM on September 22, 2012. With the relaunch, Ed Curran also returned to the station as meteorologist for the News Saturday and Sunday morning news. Following the station's best ratings turnout on Sunday morning since the introduction of Nielsen's local people meters, WBBM expanded its Sunday morning news to 2 hours, with an additional hour-long broadcast at 6 a.m., and that took place on September 22nd of 2013. On February 17, 2018, Channel 2 added a 6 p.m. newscast on Saturdays, becoming the first and only station in Chicago to have a 6 p.m. news on Saturdays. Channels 7, 5, and 9 are the 3 remaining stations in the market to carry syndicated programming and locally produced programming or specials and occasionally infomercials during the 6 to 7 p.m. hour on Saturdays. It was only temporary, however. WBBM-TV launched a streaming news service, CBS in Chicago, now known as CBS News Chicago, and that took place on April 21st, 2020. As part of a rollout of similar services, each a localized version of the national CBS in service across the CBS-owned stations. The service was initially planned to launch by the end of March 2020, but were delayed by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In June 2020, WBBM-TV was honored with a Peabody Award for the report Unwarranted, a 2019 investigation into botched police raids in Chicago and the impact they left on families and their homes. On December 16, 2021, WBBM-TV announced that Jim Williams and Marie Saavedra were named co-anchors of the re-established hour-long 4 p.m. newscast, which would debut on January 24, 2022. Along with meteorologist Mary Kay Kleiss and sports director Marshall Harris. This newscast returned after a 16-year hiatus following its cancellation in 2005. In February 2022, reporter Dana Kozlov replaced Williams as the weekend anchor. On September 12, 2022, WBBM debuted a 9 a.m. half-hour weekday morning newscast as a lead-in to the Drew Barrymore Show at 9:30. From 9 to 10, the newscast streams on CBS News Chicago. It is anchored by morning co-anchors Dana Kozlov and Audrina Sinclair, with meteorologist Laura Bannon, and traffic reports from Chris Habermill. The Enforcer. In 1975, Chicago-based jingle composer Dick Marks wrote a theme music piece for WBBM-TV's newscast that was based on the song Chicago, or This Is My City, Chicago's My Town, a folk song written by Chicago folk singer Terry Rebenard. The popular theme known as Channel 2 News and several variations on it would be used by WBBM for nearly half a century, with the periods from 1992 to 1994, plus 1998 to 1999, and 2009 as set exceptions. The tune has also been adapted by several other stations across the country, mostly CBS-owned and operated stations and affiliates, and became the de facto official newscast theme package for CBS-owned and operated stations. From 94 to 97, 2000 to 2001, 2002 to 2008, and since 2010, WBBM-TV used an updated and stylized version of the original themes specifically written for the station titled The CBS Enforcer Music Collection, composed by Frank Gehry. From 2006 to 2008, WBBM-TV used an updated version of the theme composed by Frank's son, Christian Gehry. Following the station's upgrade to HD newscast, Channel 2 commissioned a new theme, Heart of the City, composed by In the Groove Music. On June 21st, 2010, with the adaptation of a new standardized graphics package that was rolled out on CBS, Channel 2 brought back Enforcer with an orchestrated new generation version originally commissioned by New York sister station WCBS-TV. In 2022, CBS News and stations began to phase out the Enforcer music from its stations, replacing it with a new theme by Ant Food that incorporates the network's new sound mark. Ratings. With the station's aforementioned weaknesses in total day ratings since the mid-1990s, WBBM-TV's newscasts are among the lowest rated out of the news departments operated by CBS-owned and operated stations, generally rating fourth among the market's English-language stations, behind WLS-TV, WMAQ-TV, and particularly with that station's expansion of news programming since 2008, WGN-TV, but still ahead of perennial last place station WFLD. This is despite the strong lead-in by CBS's primetime lineup, which nationally has placed first among the major broadcast networks for most of the time since the 2005-2006 season. In the May 2015 local Nielsen ratings, WBBM's newscast placed fourth overall among Chicago's television stations. The 10 p.m. news saw a continued decline in viewership among the market's late newscasts, scoring a 3.5 rating, down just a tenth of a point from the May 2014 sweeps period, and at a distant third in the time slot in the coveted demographic of adults ages 25 to 54. Earning a 0.9 with primetime newscasts factored in. Channel 2's 10 p.m. news placed fourth among the Chicago market's late evening newscasts, behind WGN-TV's 9 p.m. news, and the distant third place standing for the 10 p.m. news among the market's late newscast was also apparent in the February 2015 local ratings, with the program earning a 4.3 rating, down a share of 0.7 compared to February of 2014. Controversy. In 2011, the station drew controversy over an interview with a 4-year-old child. The interview was conducted by a freelance video stringer in the aftermath of a drive-by shooting, and when the child was asked if he would stay away from guns, the child replied he will get one in the future because of his aspirations to become a police officer. The portion where the child listed his future career aspirations was not shown during newscasts, which critics say makes the child appear as if he wants to engage in criminal acts in the future. Station management later apologized for the video, saying they have taken steps to make sure the video will not air in subsequent newscasts, and that management have followed up with employees. Alright. Notable on-air staff presently at Channel 2 include Suzanne Lev McNaught, anchor and reporter, and Jim Williams, an anchor and a field reporter. Notable former on-air staff at Channel 2, and this is a pretty long list, includes Jim Acosta, Mike Adamley, Adele Akawa, Gemma Villa, Stephen Bartle, Stephen Bartlestein, Steve Baskerville, Jim Berry, Diane Burns, Cindy Brucato, John Calloway, Susan Carlson, Marianne Childers, Lauren Cohen, John Coleman, John Coughlin, Frank Currier, Penny Daniels, Paul Douglas, John Drury, John Duncanson, Jerry Dunphy, Giselle Fernandez, Fahey Flynn, Judy Garcia, Megan Glaros, Lauren Green, Burley Hines, Lester Holt, Peter Hymas, Walter Jacobson, Bill Jameson, Dan Jiggets, Rob Johnson, David Curley, Lisa Kim, Rich King, Irv Kupsinet, Bill Curtis, Kung La, Janet Langhart, Joan Lovett, Linda McClanahan, Mark Malone, Carol Morin, Mai Martinez, Jennifer McLogan, Corey McFerrin, Larry Mendy, Judy Moen, Antonio Mora, Jeff Morrell, Johnny Morris, Brent Musburger, Mary Nielsenson, Mike North, Mike Parker, Phil Ponce, Harry Porterfield, Dave Price, John Quinones, Robin Robinson, Randy Salerno, Cynthia Santana, Warner Saunders, Janet Shellman, Bob Surratt, Gene Siskel, Rob Stafford, Annie State, Kate Sullivan, Roseanne Tellez, Elizabeth Vargas, Harry Volkman, Jennifer Weigel, Tim Weigel, and Pam Zeekman. Now to technical information. Talking about the sub-channels next. As of early February 2024, WBBM-TV broadcasts a multiplex ATSC 3.0 signal. To maintain compatibility with the current majority of digital televisions, the station's channels are also broadcast in ATSC 1.0 on the multiplex signal of other Chicago television stations as follows. Of course, main CBS programming is seen on channel 2.1 in 1080i high definition in a 16:9 aspect ratio. Their ATSC 1.0 host is WGN-TV. The remaining subchannels broadcast in 480i high definition in a 16:9 aspect ratio. Start TV on channel 2.2 is hosted by WGBO-DT. Dabble on channel 2.3 is hosted by WFLD. And then channels 2.4 and 2.5, where you'll see 365 Black and Comet respectively, broadcast with MPEG-4 video. 365 Black is hosted by ATSC 1.0 host WMAQ-TV, while Comet is hosted by WGBO-DT in 1.0. WBBM-TV is currently the only full-power television station in Chicago that broadcasts its digital signal on the VHF band, as it has since its earliest days, a band that some viewers have had trouble receiving following the June 2009 transition to digital. By contrast, WLS-TV, a rival of WBBM, and the only other Chicago TV station to have operated its full-power digital signal on a VHF allocation, moved its DHF broadcast to the UHF band on Channel 44 to alleviate the problems associated with VHF reception. However, WLS retained VHF Channel 7 as the allotment for its digital fill-in translator when it launched on October 31st, 2009. Okay, low power repeater. To accommodate viewers having trouble picking up its VHF signal after the June 2009 digital transition, WBBM's newscasts were simulcast on an analog signal over WWMECA UHF Channel 23, a low-power station operating a nightlight transition service. In addition, WBBM-TV applied for a construction permit to build a low-power fill-in repeater on UHF Channel 26, the former allocation of the analog signal of WCIU-TV. However, the FCC notified WBBM that the Channel 26 allocation would interfere with low-power station W25DW. Then on April 1st, 2010, WBBM was given a 30-day notice by the agency to address the issue or have the application dismissed. It applied only for a repeater on that channel and not a full-power signal move, as Channel 7 did. The FCC granted WBBM-TV a construction permit for the Channel 26 repeater on January 18, 2012. WBBM's translator on UHF Channel 26 signed on the air on March 13, 2014, with its signal operating at low power to prevent signal interference with ABC affiliate WKOW in Madison, Wisconsin. In February 2017, a channel sharing partnership reached to address Channel 2's ever-persistent reception problems in the market, Wygo and CBS television stations announced that WBBM-TV and its Decade subchannel would respectively be simulcast on digital subchannels 48.3 and 48.4 of Wygo-owned independent station WMEU-TV, with WBBM-TV's ATSC 1.0 signal moving to WGN-TV spectrum. The simulcast would end in 2024. WBBM LDRF Digital Channel 26 officially signed off on April 19, 2017. All right, ATSC 3.0. As I said, this is the ATSC 3.0 lighthouse for the Chicago area. Here are the sub-channels in ATSC 3.0. Of course, there's WBBM NG, or Next Gen, with CBS programming on 2.1. Currently being broadcast with DRM, or Digital Rights Management, which means they block the signal. WMAQ-NG, channel 5.1, which is NBC from WMAQ-TV. That's also broadcasting with DRM. WGN NG, or the CW, on channel 9.1. That's from WGN-TV. WFLD-NG, channel 32.1, which is Fox. That's DRM encrypted. And WGBO-NG, channel 66.1, which is Univision. In January 2024, CBS News and stations announced that WBBM-TV would transition to the ATSC 3.0 standard, otherwise known as Next Gen TV, as a lighthouse station for the Chicago area, starting February 5th, 2024. WGN-TV on UHF Channel 19 now carries an ATSC 1.0 simulcast, which also allows the station to broadcast on the UHF band for the current majority of its viewers. Okay, that is a look at the history of WBBM-TV. Beginning as an independent station and then turning into a CBS owned and operated station, a designation that this station has had for now over 70 years. Alright, coming up in episode 32, we'll continue our look at the Chicago market with the history of WMAQ-TV. So that will be coming up in episode number 32. So join me for that. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Special shout out to everyone that's made it in here today, including MDOR 2005, Stardust Dreamers, who just came in. Hi. Anna Rodriguez, Squared Masses, and Macapaka 16. Alright, so that is it. Big Al now signing off. I will catch you next time for episode number 32 of Television Station History. Peace out.